Today we were back down south in the Yangifo area, closer to the Dampier Strait. The cruise director Clement had warned us we were likely in for some major currents and had been switching around plans to try and keep us in more protected areas. Because the last thing you want to do in high currents is dive some sort of pinnacle in open ocean and get blown off into the blue.
This is Mayhem, this is Gam, and Gam almost connects to Lateo.
When we did our Komodo dive trip years ago, we'd been introduced to the concept of reef hooks. They're these smallish metal hooks at the end of a 6-foot long cord. The idea is you're in the current and you can hook into rocks and stay in place without having to kick hard the entire time. This both helps you conserve tank gas since you don't have to kick against the current the entire time and avoids the need to grab onto anything with your hands, which is a big no-no when it comes to diving. We used them a handful of times in Komodo, but we would become much more comfortable with them by the end of this trip. We dropped into a relatively protected area, though you can see that the current is going against me and my bubbles are drifting backwards. We were warned that we were going to have to do this crossing where we were going to be exposed to a lot of current, and we did not record because we were swimming as hard as we could. We came across the sandy area as tight to the ground as we possibly could to avoid getting blown away by the current. Once we made it to the far side here, we could at least hug the rocks a bit to avoid the worst of it. The nice thing about current is often when you are in those conditions, that's when you see sharks and some other cool stuff because fish like to feed with what the current is blowing in. So we actually hooked in at 3 different places and just sat there waiting to see what would come by. While it doesn't look super strong on the video, the current was actually forceful enough that my regulator would free flow and my mask would leak if I wasn't careful. The sensation of that much water flowing all around you like that is really hard to convey unless you've been there. Unfortunately, the visibility was only about 40 feet, so we didn't get to see that much. This was a school of barracuda that was hanging out in the current. I tried to relax and enjoy the view as well as I could while I was hooked in, though most of the time I was having to concentrate on position so my knee didn't come down on some sort of stingy coral, and also just control my breathing. Eventually, Clement motioned us that it was time to unhook, and we just basically drifted along with the current. This wasn't the most relaxing or memorable dive, but it was a good one as far as building skills. We were all going through our tank gas faster, though surprisingly it was actually Jen that hit her tank reserve level first. So her and I ended up splitting off and heading to the surface before the others. The next dive site was Mayhem, which didn't even require the boat to move.
This dive site is deep enough underwater that it really can't be seen from the surface.
Diving gear is kind of heavy, and if you wonder what happens if you lose your balance when you're about to back roll off the boat, yeah. Are you excited by dolphins? After 2 slightly stressful dives where we spent the entire time fighting the current, the afternoon dives were supposed to be a lot more sedate. Next up was Keru Channel, which was going to be basically a drift dive where we went with the current the entire time.
This channel here in between the islands, and of course it's right in front of the boat where I can't. It is still going to be a current dive, but it's a channel dive. We're just drifting with the current the whole time.
These are called spaghetti worms. They put out these feelers that kind of crawl around the rocks looking for prey. It always looks like some sort of alien parasite to me. We also had another encounter with a wobbegong shark. Whereas most of them were underneath something and we had to shine our lights and look, this one was just lying out there for us to come across. As we were drifting by, it decided that it wanted a more comfortable spot and plopped over here on this coral. Another way the Ilike crew went above and beyond was getting back in the dinghy. Normally you just have to haul up the side with your full-on BC on, unless you have limitations like a bad back that wouldn't let you do that. Here, they actually hoisted it up for us. They also had this certain way they would greet all the dinghies as they came back, so we always knew when somebody was arriving back from a dive. This was another 4-dive day, with the last dive being a night dive, and today we were going to be diving off of Fam Jetty.
Not my artwork design. I draw like a 3-year-old. This is Fritz, thank goodness.
The site is actually the slope right off the dock, right in town. We dropped really close to the shore, and the local children seemed highly entertained watching us drop in right before sunset. We saw a number of cool things on this dive, but the highlight had to be all the cuttlefish we came across. After about 50 minutes of this, it was back to the boat for another fancy dinner and then collapsing as soon as we could all get back to our cabin.